So, if you're watching this, I'm going to assume you have G.A.S, Gear Acquisition Syndrome. It affects virtually everyone who's interested in synthesizers and synthesis, whether they are hardware synths, software synths, or in particular modular modules. Now, I'm making this video because I have watched over the last 6 to 12 months a couple of videos about how to buy a synthesizer, and they generally follow the same sort of pattern, and they generally give you very good advice. And at the risk of spoiling your surprise and delight when you do watch them, which I would certainly advise you to do, they generally revolve around creating a list of some description. They generally suggest you look at your existing equipment to see if there are any sonic gaps in your setup, anything that you need. They then suggest that you set a budget, make a list of the synths within your budget, and then make a list of the features that you want in a synth. You then cross-index the list of features with the synthesizers, and here presto, you come out with your perfect synth. Now that is very sensible and very logical, but it didn't work for me. If it didn't work for me, I'm going to assume that it will also not work for several other people. Now, if you can do this checky box thing and it works for you and you find a perfect synthesizer, that is fantastic, but I will explain why it didn't work for me. The chances are that somewhere in your subconscious you have an idea of the synthesizer that you would really like to buy. If you do the checkbox thing and your synth isn't top of the list, you will be disappointed. I did this, my synth wasn't at the top of the list, I was disappointed, so what did I do? Well, I looked at the list of features and thought, well, some are more important than others. So instead of just awarding 1 point per feature, I decided to award certain features more points than others, thereby attempting to fudge the results to make the synth that I really wanted rise to the top of the list. Now, these ways of making decisions are absolutely not new. They've been around for decades. Books have been written about them before the invention of computers or the internet. You can use the similar processes to make decisions about just about anything. But when it comes to synthesizers and the creative process, I think we tend to be a little bit more emotional than logical. Now, I'm just going to throw this psychological fact into the mix, and that is, as human beings, we tend to buy based on emotion rather than logic. And if you want any proof of this, look at adverts by car manufacturers. They have got this off to a T. If you buy this particular car, you will immediately have lots of friends and you will take off down the highway on the road to freedom. If you buy this particular car, you are a family person, you will be able to get all 4 kids and the dog into the car and all the luggage and take them away for long weekend holidays. If you buy an electric car, you alone are solely responsible for saving the planet. And that's how car manufacturers sell cars. You might find it interesting to watch every advert with that in mind. What are they actually trying to sell you? Now, in advertising and marketing, there are a couple of sayings. One of them is sell the sizzle, not the sausage. Sell the benefits, not the features. As consumers, we want to know how this particular product is going to benefit us. We want to know if it will make us more productive or give us more friends or make us a better family person or let us save the world. We want to know how this affects us personally. We are not so interested in the list of features, although obviously in the case of synthesizers, the two often are very closely linked. So that in a nutshell is how advertising and marketing works. And it works because we buy based on emotions. Now, I can give you a personal example of this. In the corner, which you may be able to see, is a synthesizer, and it is a Moog Grandmother Dark. Now, I bought this last year. I wanted a semi-modular synthesizer to accompany my modular setup, which is in a continuous state of development. But I wanted a semi-modular synthesizer. I did my research and I decided that the Moog Grandmother was the perfect synth. But I just couldn't bring myself to buy a synthesizer that looked like Sooty's xylophone. Now, that may be a reference which only people of a certain age in the UK will recognise if you remember Sooty and Sweep. For the rest of the world, I couldn't bring myself to buy a synthesizer that looked like Mickey Mouse's pain box. I just couldn't. Now, I understand why Moog made the modules the colours that they did, and as an aid to functionality, I'm sure a lot of users found it very, very helpful. However, I do know the colour scheme did polarise a lot of people in the music community. But by way of justification, if a lot of people had not felt about the grandmother's pastel colours the way that I did, why did Moog bring out a dark version? Now, I wanted a synthesizer that looked like a Moog. I wanted one that looked like a professional instrument. Now, these two products were identical apart from the colour scheme. When I heard that the dark version had been released, I rang my local music shop and said, "Can you get me one?" They said, "Yes," but it cost me an additional £150. So even though these two products were identical, as a consumer, I was prepared to pay over the odds another £150 to get a product which I thought looked more professional and which ultimately I believe would give me more pleasure and more enjoyment. Now, I can't honestly say if I had saved that £150, I would have a pastel grandmother which I would not have used just as much as I've used this one. Although perhaps I can say that because I just couldn't bring myself to buy a pastel coloured Moog. But anyway, that is a concrete and personal example of buying a product based on emotion and not a list of checkbox features. So you might be wondering, what method, if any, do I use to decide which synthesizer to buy? Well, I have a principle which I use for just about everything I buy, and I will give you a couple of examples. So the method is simply this: is this something I can afford? And is this something I can justify buying? Now, the afford part is probably the most simple to deal with. I will not go into debt in order to buy a synthesizer. Now, this is not a financial advice channel, and you, of course, are totally free to deal with your finances however you see fit. However, I have to say that I don't think going into debt is a great idea. A lot of people I know, including many friends, use credit cards as a means to buy things that they want. Now, I really don't want to dwell on this too long. Credit card debt is very easy to get into because you are virtually automatically improved. However, the rate of interest can vary enormously. On average, it's probably somewhere between 20 and 30%, although I do have a friend who was paying 49%. So if he bought a synthesizer for £1,000, he would actually end up paying £1,500 for it, depending on how quickly he paid off the credit card. If you must go into debt, then see if you can get a bank loan. That will be far cheaper. Financial advice at an end. Now, Justify to me combines a couple of functions. The first is this product good value for money? Now, this itself is a subjective question. So for me, I have to decide if a piece of equipment is good value or not. You have to do the same. Now, just by way of example, but without mentioning any names, over the last year or so, we have seen the release of several high-ticket synthesizers. Some of them, I think, are vastly overpriced. I'm not saying it is not good gear. I'm just saying, personally, I don't think they represent good value for money. But coupled with my perception of value for money, there is also a question of, will I get value from this product? Will I use it? Will it help me become more creative? Will I get enjoyment out of using it? And that sort of all rubs together to produce this justify factor. Now, I'll give you two quick examples of this. In an attempt to appeal to my worldwide audience, I will just say that there is, in the UK, a slightly upmarket supermarket which has a deli section, and in that deli section they have char grilled artichokes in oil. Now, maybe you know what I'm talking about, maybe not. But these are incredibly expensive. I think the last time I bought one of these, it was probably well over 2 years ago. But I still think about them every time I pass the shop. These were £4.50. Vastly overpriced, really. And I find it very difficult to go and buy one of these, although I do treat myself occasionally, although not for a while. Now, you might think this is slightly perverse. Can I afford £4.50 for a pack of jar-grilled artichokes? Yes, of course I can. But they are overpriced. They are not good value. I still enjoy them when I eat them, but I don't buy them very often. Now, to give you a synth example, I do have one synthesizer on my wish list. I also think that is slightly overpriced, but not to the extent that it will prevent me from actually buying it. But that, coupled with the fact that it also duplicates some of the functions of some of the synths which I already have, makes it more difficult for me to make a value judgment decision about it. Now, I have been thinking about this for a good few months, so I may pop down to my local music shop and give it a try and see if I can persuade myself that yes, this is a piece of equipment that I can justify buying, and maybe not. We'll see. So if you are going to follow my method, you need to work out your own version of justify. You need to decide whether a particular synth or synths are good value for money and whether it or they will enhance your creativity, your fun and your enjoyment in use. Now, as I said, this is something I do with virtually every purchase, and it's something which just seems to have developed over the years. I suspect that most people, including you, do something very similar, even if you haven't consciously split the decision-making process into afford and justify categories. And of course, the justify category is going to be something which is very personal to you. But I'm sure this is something that will filter through your mind and your subconscious and conscious when you are about to make a buying decision, an important buying decision. So where does this leave us when we have G.A.S and we really want to buy a synthesizer? Well, I would say by all means try the ticky box list check feature and see how that works for you. But I would also say don't buy a synthesizer simply because it ticks all the boxes. If it's not something which you actually want, you are not going to get the pleasure, the enjoyment out of it, and it's not going to enhance your creativity. So don't buy it just because it ticks the boxes. Buy it because it's a synthesizer that you really want. So there we are. I have just added my 2 pennies worth, my 2 cents worth of opinion into the debate of how best to buy a synthesizer. I can only hope that you found this interesting, but more to the point, useful, and will bear it in mind when you are about to make your next synth purchase. I'd be really interested to know how you get on. I'd be really interested to know if you have a system or method you use when buying things, particularly synthesizers. So please let me know and leave a comment down below. If you have any questions about this, but preferably not about credit card debt, then please leave a comment in the comment section below and I will do my best to answer them. And if you have enjoyed this video, then please do consider subscribing to the channel because it really does encourage me and helps me produce more videos which I hope are helpful and enjoyable. Ring the bell, hit the big thumb. But as ever, I really do appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos. So for that, thank you very much. I will see you again very soon.